I'm going to talk you through how to set up a Premiere Profile so that you can edit your videos. This is just a basics in Premiere Pro really, just to get you set up with files and how to kind of cut your videos in a really simple way and add some text as well. So the first thing to do is click on Premiere Pro. If you can't find it in this bottom panel, then click on the launch pad and search for it. It will take a little bit of time to load, so just let it bounce. You only need to click on it the once. Like I said, it does take a little bit of time, but you just need patience. Please try and resist the urge to click, click, click. So there we go. It has taken a little bit of time. I think that was even about a minute and a half or something like that. You do have to just be a bit patient. When you're creating a brand new project, you click on New Project, and obviously when you're opening an old project, you click on Open Project. So at the moment we're starting a brand new one, so we're going to click on New, and the first and most important thing is that we're going to name it. And we need to make sure that we put it in the right place as well. So the second thing you do is click Browse, and you can see that it's got some kind of funny file location in Adobe, which is, we're never going to be able to find our video there. So what we want to do is put it on the media drive. I'm just going to use group 7 as a test here. So I'm going to put it in the group 7 folder. Okay, so you just hit OK on that. And this is your editing window. There are a few different parts to this. Generally in this section here is what we call the sequence. There isn't a sequence there yet, we're about to create one, but that's where you'll have your timeline, where you'll actually build your film. This space in the top right is where you will preview your timeline. So whatever is on the timeline, you will see play here. This is what we call the project bin. This is where you'll keep all of your rushes, all of the sound files, and then this is the source window for everything that's in the bin. Okay. There are a few tabs across the top, which mean that we can sort of change the layout of this window depending on what it is that we're trying to achieve. So if your window changes for whatever reason, make sure that you just click back to editing, because we don't really need any of the others yet. Okay, the second thing that we want to do is go to File and Import, and we want to find some footage to import. So I'm going to import the dealing 2 and the close-up of eye and the building 2. So all I've done there is hit Command, and I've selected the footage that I want and the sound file that I want, and I'm going to click Import, and that will take a little bit of time. So you actually might want to just select all your footage, or there might be specific bits that you want. And in order to test out whether that footage is working or not, you double click on it and you should see it appear here. Okay, so I'm going to use this little blue tab just to scroll across to be able to view the footage, or you can hit the space bar and that will allow you to view the footage too. Now, we don't want all of this, we just want a little bit of it. So I'm going to scroll up to a point where I think that it's good, and I'm going to just use the right arrow key on the keyboard just to get it to a point where it's in focus. It's getting there, and I'm going to hit the I button, I for in, and I'm going to take it after the zoom. There we go, and I'm going to hit O. So that has basically chopped our footage, and that's ready to go on a timeline that actually doesn't exist yet. So you need to go to File, New, Sequence. And there are lots of different options. We've used a digital SLR camera. We've shot in 1080p, hopefully, at 25 frames per second. You can change that frame rate, and there are ways of changing the frame rate on the camera so that you can shoot in 24 or 25. But for now, leave it at 25. You want to name your sequence as well. Usually, I name the sequence exactly the same as the project name. Just makes things easier a bit later on. So there's my sequence, and so now I'm ready to drag my clip on. So you can see a little film reel there, and you can also see some sound waves there. So I'm just going to drag the audio only because I don't want the sound from this clip, just want the audio. And you can see that's really tiny because it's 9 minutes long is this timeline, and it was only a few seconds long, the clip. So this bar along the bottom allows you to scroll across, but also if you drag it together, it allows you to zoom into your timeline as well, just so we can see that shot there. Okay, so I'm just going to cut a few of the pieces together. Okay, so the really simple technique of double clicking, clicking I and O, dragging it onto the timeline, and then we've got the basic sequence. Now, you might think actually that shot lingers just a little bit too much at the end, so we can always cut that here, either by double clicking and it appears in the viewfinder, and we can just cut that back a little bit and you can see it cut on the timeline. Alternatively, if you hover over the edges of your clip on the timeline, you can cut that again and you can move it and you can patch it back together. It might be appropriate to put a transition between particular shots, and so for that you want to go to Effects, which is in your bin. You want to go to Video Transitions. You might want to try Dissolve, Film Dissolve for example, or a Dip to Black, Cross Dissolve. You might want to fade in. Film Dissolve at the beginning is usually quite nice. Okay, and you can see that when I've put the dissolve on, it's actually gone red over the top. That means it's not rendered, so all we need to do is click on the clip, click enter, and what it'll do is just smooth out that transition so that we can view it properly. It's gone green, perfect. So when you've got your sequence ready and you've added a fade at the beginning and the end, or wherever else is appropriate, if you wanted to add one between two clips, you can. You can see that it snaps to those two clips and it will fade one into the other. You can also make that smaller, or you can just delete it altogether. You now want to add a title, so you click on Title, New, Default Still, and give it a name again, so first title, but make sure it's labelled something sensible that is going to communicate to you what it is, because when you have lots of titles and lots of sounds and lots of pieces of footage in the bin, it can get really confusing. So this is almost like a miniature Photoshop, really. There's lots of word art style fonts and things which are not that interesting. But if you've got the T tool selected and you can write some text. Oh, there was also a year, wasn't there? So 2018. I don't think my box was big enough. There it is. There we go. If you just click the once, your box will be the size of the text rather than making a big text box, which is a bit easier actually. Okay, I'm going to highlight this and we're going to center it. And to get it sort of in the center, it's really tricky to tell where the center is. So thankfully there's a tool for that. So hit center horizontal and vertical, and that will put it in the very center. I also want to change the font. So I'm going to change the font to something a bit more interesting. Great. You can also change various things to do with the font. Obviously the size you can change. You can change where it sits in relation to the line, where the letters sit in relation to each other, and so on. You can also change the colour of that. Now maybe there's a particular colour within your film that you want to pick out, so you can use this pipette tool and go and find that. This dark blue is quite interesting. However, that doesn't quite work there, so I'm gonna keep it white, and instead I'm going to add a shadow to it, just a very subtle shadow. So I'm going to keep the shadow black, and I'm just going to change the opacity of that shadow. So you can see the shadow disappearing or getting much darker. So we don't want it to be overly pronounced, but just enough to lift the text off the screen. You can also change the angle of that. Again, just enough to lift it off the screen. Perfect. And because we've already named it, I can click the red cross. If I go to my project bin, there it is. If you want a title exactly the same as this, so it's just got slightly different words, but it's exactly the same, actually what you can do is open it up and click new title based on the current one. So we can call it the second title, and that means that we can change it, and we know that it's still perfectly in the centre, and so on. You can treat these titles exactly the same as footage. You can drag them onto your timeline. What I tend to have is V1 with main footage, V2 with titles, V3 with graphics, and whatever else you want to add, or you might layer it up slightly differently, but it's the principle of kind of creating a bit of a collage out of it. You can also add effects like a dissolve, so that it fades in and fades out again. Now you might want to add some sound, so we want to do exactly the same. Double click on the sound and have a listen. So I've just selected that bit. Now this time we just want the audio only. So I'm going to drag that onto there. I'm going to try and get it exactly in position. Obviously you'll be more thorough. Okay. And again, you can add effects, but you can't use the video transitions. You have to use audio transitions. So just use constant gain, add that on there, and it will fade it in. Obviously, you don't want to fade in when someone's talking. So it actually might be that we want to take this a little bit out here so that we get a bit of ambient sound just before he starts talking. And that is what fades in.
So maybe being a drug dealer was better than being popular.
Okay. And fade it out just at the end, just enough so it doesn't sound like it's been cut completely. And when you add music and your music is in the bin, you will then drag it onto A2. So you might want this for your dialogue, and A2 for your music. And again, you can cut it in exactly the same way we've done here, add fades and transitions to it in the same way. One of the other things you might want to do is add effects to your video clips, maybe to make them all consistent with each other, or maybe you're just trying to add a unique effect to create some meaning. If you double click on one of the elements of your sequence and you go to effect controls, you can change the scale or proportions of an image just by dragging that a little bit. So I don't know, that might be relevant if you wanted to do that. Maybe you wanted to change the aspect ratio, and in that case we need to go to effects, video effects. We want to go to transform and crop, drag that onto there, and you can see now it's added to the effect control. So click on the clip, click on effect controls, and you can see that the crop has been dropped on there. So I want to just crop it slightly at the top, and also crop it slightly at the bottom. And that's providing, obviously we want to make it even at the top and the bottom. That's providing you have framed your shot adequately. If not, you might need to create a title with a black box and sort of add that on over the top and then drag it over the whole clip. But it's much better if you sort of play around with each shot individually and get the aspect ratio right, but obviously make it consistent across your whole film. You might also want to change some of the colour. So there's lots and lots of different options to play with colour. There's different adjustments that you can make, and I encourage you to come back and play around with this in your own time. But we're just going to use this one here for now, and I'm going to go to basic correction. The other way of doing this, of course, is going to effects. So you can either do it in the effects control here, or by changing the window to effects, and we get this one here. So I'm going to add a bit of a faded film effect. I'm going to sharpen it up slightly. I'm going to desaturate it a little bit and make it more vibrant as well, so just so those colours pop, so it doesn't become black and white, but it kind of feels a bit more desaturated. What we might also want to do is accentuate the difference between the background and the foreground. So I want to kind of add a bit of a teal into the background, and also in the highlight add a little bit of orange, because we've already got orange as quite a dominant colour in this shot, so it feels quite nice just to accentuate that a little bit. There's lots you can do with this, and it's almost like a more complex version of what you can do with an Instagram photo, to be honest. So lots of the terms should be familiar to you. Now you can go a little bit too far, a bit over the top and make it look completely unrealistic. But it's really about enhancing what's there. But I just encourage you to have a play around with it until you get a nice film effect, or at least the desired effects that you're after. Okay, so I'm going to go back to editing. So I've got my normal editing space open, and you can see the difference between this shot and this shot now. So this is the document that we just created. So if you wouldn't need to open up Premiere Pro next time, you would just go straight to your media drive folder and click on the Premiere Pro file. So best of luck as you start to build your basic timelines.